Vic Mornington, how's everybody doing? So it's been a few weeks since the last video was popped up. Real life stuff got in the way, unfortunately, but back finally, and back doing videos for Second Life. We're not actually in Second Life right now, we're actually looking at my desktop. So last week I had to do a full format of the PC, like a complete wipe of the C drive, because things were just getting really freakily stupid. Windows just screws up if it's an old install of Windows. Installing programs, uninstalling programs, reinstalling drivers, updating drivers. I mean, that last install of Windows was a good, 4 years old? So I decided, you know what, I'm going to wipe everything. And that's exactly what I did. So this video is basically showing a fresh install of the latest version of Firestorm. This video was recorded on the 6th of October 2024, in case anyone's wondering. It's the latest main release, not beta release, but main release of the Firestorm viewer for Second Life. This is not just going to be a case of me installing Firestorm. I'm also going to be going through a number of tips and tricks for people that are using not just Firestorm, but any of the major Second Life viewers, including the default vanilla viewer. A few tips and tricks that may help Second Life run that little bit better on your computer. So there's the Firestorm installer all the way up there at the top. It's 711075913 as of recording. So we're going to run the installer on this. Move that over there. There we go. Everything's defaulting to the main screen. I agree. So, tip number one. Now, it depends, again, a lot of these tips is going to depend on the configuration of your computer, right? I generally don't tend to install all my programs on the C drive. I tend to install at least the most used programs, the programs that I use every day. I tend to install them on a separate drive from the C drive. And there's a number of reasons to do this, even if you're using a SSD, even that's a solid state drive, even if you're using an M2 drive, like the newest versions of solid states, it's still advisable to get your programs, at least your common used programs, installed into a separate drive that's not on the C drive. That way, all the stuff that's on the C drive, in other words, Windows, and all your drivers are sitting there on a drive that's not being used as much, because the program that you're running is on a separate drive, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this Firestorm folder name, then I'm going to browse, then I'm going to head into this PC, and then I'm going to click on Programs, and then Program Files, and then I'm going to click on OK. Then I'm going to right click and paste the Firestorm Release x64 folder name that I just copied from the previous install location. So now it's going to go into E, Program Files, Firestorm Release x64, Install. Create an entry in the Start menu, and there we go. Firestorm is now installing. So that's the first little hint I've got going for you there. If you're going to be using Second Life every single day, which I know most of you probably are, if you've got a separate drive, it's always advisable, at least it's always advisable to install your commonly used programs into that separate drive. It's a bit of an old hack from days gone by, and if you're like me and you've got loads of programs running, like I've got Adobe, I've got Microsoft Office, I have got a whole bunch of other games, most of those programs are actually installed on this E drive and Program Files. Yes, I want to handle that as I want to have that registered as the default handler, and then we close. And now we're going to start Firestorm. So before we even log in here, there is a few tips and tricks that you can put in to the Firestorm properties before you even decide to log in. So I'm going to wait on Firestorm loading, and there we go, we've loaded. So we're going to head up to Viewer, and we're going to go into Preferences. Graphics, I've covered graphics already in the previous video that was uploaded that was covering PBR. So I've covered graphics already along with the hardware settings and the override VRAM detection. So if you're looking for hints and tips to stop Firestorm or stop your favourite viewer from running like a slideshow, basically look at the previous video covering PBR. But this is basically a fresh install we're looking at here. Sound and media, you don't need to worry about that. Network and files. This is where things get a little bit interesting. So, this maximum bandwidth slider up here, I usually set mine for 1450 kilobaud per second, or kilobytes, that's old school, kilobytes per second. Going over that, again, you've seen the pop-up there. Going over that is not recommended unless you have got an extremely up-to-date router or an extremely up-to-date modem from your internet service provider. Second Life very rarely uses UDP protocols to download textures and download mesh and download all the other stuff that you see on your screen. Second Life now uses HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's the same HTTP that you see at the very front of web addresses. That's the same protocol that Linden Lab has been using for downloading textures, downloading animations, downloading sounds, downloading mesh, downloading about 90% of the stuff basically that you see on your screen is downloaded via HTTP. It's no longer being downloaded via UDP, which is a much more older and to some degree stabler system of downloading than HTTP is. So, no matter what internet speed, download speed you've got, right? No matter what download speed you've got, you don't want to run the risk of essentially oversaturating the HTTP ports that are open on your router or on your modem. This is why Firestorm, I've always suggested to keep it below 1500 kilobits per second. If you go over that, you start running the risk of oversaturating your HTTP ports. Now, again, if you are using a router that's been released onto the market within the last 2 years, or you're using a modem provided by your ISP, and that ISP has stated that it is using the current up-to-date HTTP protocols and not the old version 3 ones from like a decade ago, then you could probably afford to whack that all the way up to 3,000. But to play it safe, I would still recommend going for 1,500. I would still recommend doing that, 1,500, in case you don't know, or just to play it safe. So that's why Firestorm has always said keep it at 1,500 or below, because a lot of people out there are using older modems and older routers that don't have the saturation point as high as the current specs are for HTTP ports. So that covers connection. Now we're going to go into directories, and this is where a little bit of jiggery-pokery can go on here. Now, a few things need to be in place before we look at what's going on with the directories tab. Number one, you need to have at least 2 hard drives, your C drive and your D drive. If you've installed Firestorm into a separate drive, then you've got more than one drive. Some of you out there may even have 3 or 4 drives like I have. Number 2, are you using on your separate drives solid state, M2 or old school spinning hard disks? Now, it's the last one that you need to pay attention to, because this second trick is a trick that I've been doing for a very, very long time now. So, I've got 3 drives And well, technically I've got 4, but I don't use the 4th one. I've got 3 drives in this computer. The C drive, which is where Windows is installed, along with all the drivers. The D drive, where I keep some of the videos that I'm doing for my job. And the E drive, which is where I keep all the programs. So Adobe, Premiere Pro, Second Life, they all get shoved into the E drive. That's where all the programs sit. With Second Life, there is a lot of hard drive churn that goes on. In other words, the hard drive is constantly being read, the hard drive is constantly being written. And the reason that this is happening is that everything that you look at in Second Life is downloaded and not kept on your drive, unless it's kept in the cache. So hint number 1, see this up here, texture cache size, asset cache size, crank them all the way up, as far as that slider's going to go, all the way up. Don't keep it at like 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000, because the problem is, if you limit the texture cache size too low, for instance, 2,000 megabytes, which is basically 2 gig, right? 2 gig. What's going to happen is that cache is going to hit the 2 gigabyte limit, then it's going to go back to the beginning of the cache in order of the cache being saved, and it will delete a texture to replace it. It will delete the next texture to replace it. So let's say you like to go to a lot of clubs, like a lot of you do. You go to Warehouse 21, that 2 gigabyte cache limit is going to be hit immediately on landing, because there's always a lot of people in Warehouse 21. You go back to your home, you'll probably find that you're having to essentially re-download all the textures in your home, because that 2 gigabyte cap for the texture cache has been hit by going to Warehouse 21, right? So this slider here, just crank it all the way up to the top. The same goes with the asset cache size. And this goes if you're using a spinning hard drive, like the old school hard drives, or if you're using an SSD, or you're using an M2 drive. Just crank it all the way up to the top. The second most important thing here is your cache location. The location the cache is kept in. This is going to be the folder, and more importantly, the hard drive that's going to be hammered the most. Once you run Firestorm, or once you run the Second Life viewer, that's essentially it. The hard drive is not going to be called upon to run many more files in the program file that you've installed Second Life into. But this location here is going to be the most important one. Now again, if you've done the trick, the first trick that I told you, to basically install Firestorm into its own folder on a separate drive away from the C drive, then this little trick, what you're going to do is basically install the cache location onto the same drive that you've popped your install of Firestorm into. In other words, not the C drive. That's for Windows. That makes sure that Windows can basically call files to its heart's content. It's not going to be absolutely hammered with requests to basically res textures, download textures, delete textures. If you've got 3 hard drives, this is where you can have a little bit more fun. So again, C drive is where I've got Windows and all the drivers on. E drive is where I've got Firestorm installed to. But I've also got a D drive. And the D drive isn't used that much because that drive is basically sitting there with video files on it that I need to render out during the work week. And it's on that drive that I've opened up an SL folder, and it's on that D drive that I also use for the cache files for Firestorm, which is installed on the E drive. So what I've basically done here, I've kept the cache files away from the install drive that Firestorm's installed to. So that way the D drive can sit there and download and delete and re-download and delete textures over and over again. and that action's not going to impact the E drive that I've got Firestorm installed into. The only way you can really do this to make sure that everything is playing fine all separately is if you've got 3 hard drives installed in your computer. And even then, to do this kind of trick, 2 of those drives have at least got to be a solid state drive, SSD or an M.2 drive on your PC. You can do this trick as well with old spinning hard disks if you still have a computer that's got an old school hard drive in it with the spinning disk inside. But having the texture cache installed separately on a separate drive away from the install location and the install drive that Firestorm is in basically makes things run that little tiny bit quicker, because it's 2 separate drives being pulled, and those 2 drives are being pulled for specific things. There's no crossover going on within one single drive that has to download all the textures and at the same time run Windows and at the same time run Firestorm. That's why it's always advisable to keep the SL cache separate from the install folder and the install drive that you've got Firestorm in. Again, this trick only really works if you've got 3 separate hard drives installed on your computer. If you've only got 2 hard drives and you've installed Firestorm into the separate drive, your D drive in other words, I would still recommend putting your cache folder away from the C drive and open up a new folder on your D drive, right? So the same the same drive that you've installed your Firestorm into, and have the cache sitting in with Firestorm. That way you're keeping the C drive quiet so Windows doesn't have a hissy fit. Simple as that, folks. So that's the drive thing. Move and view, movement, mouse look. It's mouse look, right? So again, when you are doing a lot of, where is it? A lot of moving around movement. That's the one. Double click on land. Teleport to clicked point. It's amazing how many people don't know about this one. So single click on land, you don't want anything happening when you single click on land. But this one here, double click on land, teleport to clicked point. So you're standing in your garden, right? And you're lazy like me, and you see a problem with one of the flowers not resin correctly. Double click next to that plant and your avatar will immediately teleport to that location that you double clicked on. It's amazing the people that don't know about that one. So yeah, teleport to clicked point on double click on land. The next one we're going to, in the last tab we're going to pay a lot of attention to, is privacy. Privacy look at. So, if you do a lot of camming around, especially in clubs like I do, switch this on, show look at targets, because you'll then be able to see all the people that's camming you who haven't done this trick and not switched off their look at targets. Don't show my own look at targets because you already know what you're looking at, and you want to make sure render lines to look at target is switched on. Now, to make sure that nobody can see what you're camming, these 3 here, don't send my look at target to others, check it. Don't send any look at targets at all, not even to myself. I don't know why I've got that checked. Uncheck that. Don't send my selection target hints, check that. Oh yeah, and also check limit distance from head and keep that at 1 meter. And what you've basically done, you've switched on look at targets. And that means you'll be able to see who's camming you, because all the little lines will go straight to your head. But you've also switched off your avatar sending out info to what you're camming, so no one will be able to see what you're now camming at. Again, it's amazing the people that don't know about this either, and they're all Firestorm users. You go to a club like Peak Lounge or Warehouse 21, it's amazing the amount of people that are basically camming other people, and their full render target is open to look at for everyone. So again, don't show me my own look at targets, you don't want to see that. Render lines to look at target, you want that switched switched on. Don't send my look at targets to others. You want that switched on so no one can see what you're camming. Don't send any look at targets at all. You want that switched off so you can actually see look at targets. Don't send my selection target hints and limit distance from head to 1 meter. Now you can click OK. Now, if you've set a different folder and a different drive for your cache, you'll want to basically restart Firestorm. In fact, I think it restarts itself, but if it doesn't, you'll want to restart Firestorm. Basically, close the program, open it back up again. Let's log in and see what's going on here. Now again, I've already cleared my cache out. And as you can see, things are resing pretty damn quick. Again, the avatar's always the last to load. I've got the draw distance set for 568 meters. So this is basically downloading half of Magnolia City. But as you can see, I've already downloaded. And if I pull this camera out, most of Magnolia is now in the process of downloading as well. Again, these little hints and tips, you are going to notice a difference. You're really going to notice a difference if, number one, you go to busy clubs. Number two, you go to busy clubs several times a day. In other words, several different clubs every single day. Number one, things are going to res a lot quicker, as you just seen with what happened here. Things are going to res a lot quicker. If you crank up the storage size on your cache, like I said to do, you're also going to notice when you teleport back to your home, you're not re-downloading all the textures on the wall because you've managed to set the cache size to a very, very large cache folder. Now, all of this comes with a caveat, and as I said at the beginning, there's 3 types of hard drives. SSD, which is usually in a contained box that is connected through a SATA cable. M2, which is usually a stick, which is installed onto the motherboard itself, or old school spinning hard disks. All of these tricks that I've showed you are going to work with all of these 3 types of drives, but if you've got nothing but spinning hard drives, and if you don't know what I'm talking about and you don't know if you've got a spinning hard drive, have a word with your local geeky friend and he'll check, or she in some cases will check for you if you've got an old school spinning hard drive in your computer. All of these tricks will work, but with a spinning hard drive, you will still notice occasional slowdowns because spinning hard drives are a lot slower than the modern SSD or M2 flash memory equivalents. So there is a caveat with this. There is definitely a caveat. But even if you are using an old school spinning hard drive and it's 2 or 3 spinning hard drives you've got in your computer case, if you do this trick with the cache and with the install location for Firestorm, you will still notice a difference, and most importantly, your Windows install will thank you immensely because now your C drive is not being constantly hammered with the cache folder being installed on the C drive. Your cache folder is now installed on a separate drive away from Windows, which means Windows is going to act 10 times more happier. Anyway, that's it from me, folks. Have a good one.